I'm sure that you have seen those shoulder hobo bags everywhere on Pinterest, so after making a few samples I came up with this pattern and I wanted to show you how I made it. This tutorial is absolute beginner friendly. It is one of the easiest things that I made and it's also very quick. You don't need anything special and we will make the pattern in this video together and you can adjust it to your liking. As you can see, I use this fake leathery material for the outside. Depending on what material you choose, it will influence how stable and how firm your bag is going to be in the end. You can definitely use whatever you want. This material that I use was actually not for clothes, but it was for household things, furniture, fabrics. I started by cutting out my 2 squares from the outside material. The squares are 62 centimeters and 42 centimeters wide. If you want the bag to be wider, you just make it wider. If you want it to be longer, make it longer. Feel free to make it however small or big you want. After I've cut out 2 squares with the same measurements from the outside material, I also cut 2 squares with the same measurements from the inside material, the lining. I used, I think, something like linen cotton blend, but you can use whatever lining you want. So now we're gonna start with the actual pattern. We're gonna take one of the squares and fold it lengthwise, right sides together. Now with the open side towards us, we're gonna make some markings. The first marking is gonna be on the one side 5 centimeters. This is gonna be the shoulder straps. If you want the shoulder straps to be wider, then make it here wider than 6 centimeters, and if you want them to be thinner, then make it less. Then we're gonna mark 20 centimeters, and at the 20 centimeter line, I'm gonna mark 7 centimeters inwards. Then I'm gonna take another 10 centimeters and go there 15 centimeters inside. So then I have 3 marking points. Now I'm gonna connect those 3 points with a tool like this, but you can also just do it by hand or any other curved ruler that you have. I simply like to use this tool for it. And as you can see, we now have already a shape for the bag. If you want the shape to be different, for example more open under the armhole, then you can make it lower, or if you want it less steep, or if you want it different curved, you can make it the change now while drawing it on. In the bottom I made another 5 centimeter square, and then I'm cutting out everything. Once you've cut out this one square, you're going to use it as a template for all the other 3 squares. So I've just put it on top and cut out so they all have the same shape. The next step is optional because I wanted to be able to close the bag. I added those close clip thingies and I placed them in the middle, 3.5 centimeters under the edge, and I place them on the right sides, of course. If you want, for example, you can add more buttons or even a zipper at this step. I've simply hand sewn the things in and was done with it. Now we're gonna put the 2 lining pieces on top of each other, right sides together, and we're also gonna put the outside materials, right sides, on top of each other, and we're gonna pin the edges, so the left, right and bottom edge together. And then before sewing all the edges, we're gonna mark on the bottom of the lining a little gap, and this gap we're not gonna sew close, so later we can flip it inside out. So we're gonna sew on the lining the left edge, the right edge, and then also on the bottom towards the mark from both sides. I'm sewing with a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance, and this is going to be basically the seam allowance for all the stitches in this tutorial. When you're done, you flip it around, and as you can see, it doesn't look so good because the seam goes inside, so I would always recommend to press the seam open. I tried it, and with my fabric it did not work at all, so I didn't press the seam open, but I simply top stitched the seam later so it would be flat and nice and not do this. But if you just use another material or just some simple cotton, you can definitely press the seam open. Now we're gonna take all 4 bottom corners and we're gonna put it together so the seams align, right sides together of course, and we're gonna pin it. And this is gonna be the bottom of our bag. So we pin it and then sew it with the same seam allowance. Then we're gonna flip the outside fabric right side out, and we're gonna take the outside piece and put it into the lining piece so the right sides are together. And now we're gonna pin the curved edges, the top curve and the bottom curve together, and we're gonna sew there with the same seam allowance again. But on one side we're gonna leave a little gap on each side. So this gap we're not gonna sew, we start from the marking and leave the beginning and end of one side open. After sewing everything, we're gonna make little cuts with scissors around the seam allowance. Be careful to not cut into the seam. Now through the hole in the bottom of the lining, we're gonna pull everything through this hole so that the right side of the outside material is again there. We will also close the hole, so we're gonna press the seam allowance right sides towards each other like you see here. And then we're just gonna pin and sew it with an edge stitch, so just close to the edge. Now we can put the lining fabric inside the bag, and then we want to finish off with the straps. We're gonna take both strap ends and open them and then put the right sides towards each other so that the seams align. We're gonna pin it and then also sew with the same seam allowance again. Now we also need to close this hole, so we're gonna fold the wrong sides towards each other and then press the seam allowances right sides together again. And so it stays in place, we're gonna top stitch over this, but not just here, but we're gonna top stitch the entire way. So we're gonna pull everywhere the lining inside and then top stitch both sides. If your fabric allows it, I would also press here first the lining in place, but my fabric didn't, so I was just carefully sewing here. Here you can see again when I came to the strap opening how I was aligning the lining with the outside material. So the gap closes and the lining is inside nicely, not seen from the outside. After I top stitched both sides, I also wanted to top stitch the side because I couldn't press the seam open because of the material. And I also just liked how it looked, so I did this on both sides and then my bag was done. I hope you liked the tutorial and see you next time.